You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button.
So Brian Kelly's been LSU's head football coach for about 18 months. And pretty much everything he has done has come up aces. Polished off his first recruiting class, had the best transfer class in the country, brought in Jaden Daniels, hired a great staff, won the SEC West, beat Bama, went into this offseason, another great recruiting class, started to rebuild the fence around Louisiana. And it's really just been a lot of building brick on top of brick on top of brick, not only having laid that foundation, which was there, but building the gigantic structure on top of the foundation, the championship structure. But if there's one whiff, it might be this one. When Brian Kelly was hired, he did not retain Greg McMahon as his special teams coordinator. And McMahon today was hired as the special teams coordinator at Tulane. Many of you are familiar, but McMahon was at LSU for 5 seasons. He was a special teams analyst for LSU in 2017, and special teams at LSU went very poorly in 2017, and so then they promoted McMahon from analyst to the full-time special teams coordinator job on field, which he held 18 through 21 when Ed Orgeron was fired. And then, of course, Brian Kelly came in and didn't retain anybody from Orgeron's staff. And, I shouldn't say that. They did retain Brad Davis as the offensive line coach, but didn't retain Greg McMahon. And McMahon went on and has spent the last year in both the USFL and the XFL. So the 2022 USFL season, he was with the Houston Gamblers, and then this 2023 XFL season, he was with the Houston Roughnecks. So the professional football teams in Houston with the USFL and the XFL. And everybody knows McMahon was with the Saints for a long stint. From 2008 to 2016, he was the Saints special teams coordinator. I remember last year when Brian Kelly was hired and then he put his staff together. T-Bob and I were doing the Scone and T podcast. And we did an exercise where when Kelly had finished his staff, we did a side-by-side comparison of every member of the staff. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, D-line, linebacker, secondary coach, all the way through. Offensive line, quarterback, tight ends, running backs, everything. Like the entire staff. And every single spot on the staff under Kelly, we both agreed was an upgrade over the previous staff. Every spot except one. And it was special teams coordinator, where, of course, you had Brian Poling coming in, replacing Greg McMahon at special teams coordinator. Now, we could also talk about the secondary, where Corey Raymond was magnificent in building DBU, and that we might have said that was a second as well. But it was very obvious, considering experience, accolades, everything, the way that Greg McMahon had built up LSU's special teams. Look, he's the guy that went and identified Cole Tracy. He found Cole Tracy. He's the one who got Avery Atkins here as a walk-on who became your kickoff specialist. Greg McMahon's the one who recruited Cade York, who became the best kicker in the history of the program. So Greg McMahon deserves a tremendous amount of credit. And I've said, and I've maintained that I believe Greg McMahon was Ed Orgeron's best hire. When Ed got the job, he was the interim for part of the 2016 season, and literally the day after he was hired, if you don't remember this, not that you need the history lesson, but I mean, literally, Ed Orgeron was hired on a Saturday. Sunday, he fired Bradley Dale Pivito, who was Les Miles' special teams coordinator. And he did not hire a special teams coordinator. He tried to do what Brian Kelly is attempting to do this year, which was just kind of piece it together. You know, they brought in McMahon. McMahon would coach the coach as an analyst. McMahon would coach the coaches, and then the coaches would try to do the job on the field, and it went very badly. That was the year where you had Connor Culp and Jack Gonsolin kicking, and you never found stability there, and special teams was very bad for LSU in 2017. And as a result, Orgeron moved McMahon into a full-time on-field role, and I think that's the best decision he made. I mean, McMahon was spectacular. And, you know, Brian Kelly coming in, I understand. You want to bring in your guys. And he saw tremendous value in Brian Polian and having him on staff, and they found a role for him as the special teams coordinator and recruiting coordinator, but really he was Kelly's right hand. And the other thing that is very clear is when Polian moved out, which he had to be moved off the field. You can't be, we went through these numbers. LSU with a special teams efficiency rating, which is a metric that combines all of the special teams units for an efficiency rating. LSU was 125th in the country out of 131 last year. 125 out of 131. You could not justify bringing back Brian Polian in that role. You had to move on, which they did. So they moved Polian into the GM role, and now he's left to go be an athletic director. But the other side of that is it was very clear that when you brought John Jancic over from Georgia, he was always going to be on the field this year. He was going to do 1 year as an analyst, and then you were going to move him on the field. And those types of handshake deals happen all the time in coaching. And I want to be abundantly clear. I think having John Jancic on staff is magnificent. That guy has been a defensive coordinator at Tennessee, at Colorado State. He's been all over. He was at Georgia. I mean, he's got a tremendous amount of experience, and having him on your staff is a great asset. And they've got him coaching the jack linebackers, but splitting up the special teams role this year, I think shows, honestly, disrespect to the third phase of the game, especially when it was as bad as it was a year ago. To not bring in a guy who is masterful at that to fix it is a little short-sighted. And I sincerely hope that doesn't bite LSU this year. But it's hard not to look at Greg McMahon, who was here, who was magnificent in that role for a half decade, who brought some of the best specialists this program has ever produced. And I understand a coach is going to come in and wants to hire his own staff, and he deserves that right. And of course, Brian Kelly has that right. But shuffling Greg McMahon out was a miss. That was a whiff. Brian Kelly hadn't had many of them in his time at LSU. That might be it. That and the Texas A&M loss. I mean, that might be it through 18 months. But seeing Greg McMahon back in collegiate coaching, back in Louisiana at Tulane, makes you you long a little bit for it, because you realize that's a guy that probably would have stayed at LSU. I'm sure would have loved to have stayed at LSU. Would have been making more money than he's going to make at Tulane. I'm sure was comfortable here as well. But if it wasn't McMahon, somebody else. But I sincerely hope that this isn't a lesson that Brian Kelly needs to learn twice. Hope they're able to get special teams in order here in 2023, because you would hate to have a team that has all the makings of a championship contender. All the makings. The veteran quarterback, to the talented offensive players, a versatile veteran defense that you've supplemented with a lot of really good transfer players, to have a schedule that's in your favor, all these things in your favor, but you neglect the third phase and it costs you. Here's hoping it doesn't. But Greg McMahon hired today at Tulane to be their special teams coordinator. You can't help but wonder. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.